is your favorite cartoon squirrel of all time? So we've got, let's see, we've got Scrat from Ice Age, maybe Sandy Cheeks from SpongeBob SquarePants. But my favorite squirrel of all time has got to be Rocky from Rocky and Bullwinkle, the flying squirrel. Okay, so while you people who didn't answer, while you guys are thinking about your favorite cartoon squirrel, I'm going to tell you a story about the day my granddad totally ruined squirrels for me, but simultaneously taught me a lesson that now 30 years later I was able to use last month to get me in the right mindset during COVID. So if you can imagine for a moment, I'm knee-high to a grasshopper, okay? And if I didn't have old knees, I'd kind of let you know how I was crouched down beside him one summer day on the porch, sitting there beside my granddad, mouth open, which we now know is a red flag for airway concerns for kids, right? But that's another speech. Remind me to tell you about that later. But so I'm sitting there, mouth open, waiting for him to tell me one of his legendary stories. And right as he starts to get in the good part of the beginning of the story, this squirrel starts skipping around the yard. And he totally pivots his thought and starts to tell me about how if he was a much younger man, he'd go out there and go chase the squirrel down and eat the squirrel. And I said, ugh, Granddaddy, yuck, I'm not gonna eat a squirrel. That's the grossest thing I've ever heard of, yuck. And he said something to me that I remember even though that was almost 30 years ago. He said in his country voice, that's because you don't know what it's like to be hungry, girl. Button touching your backbone, you don't know what it's like to be hungry. Now, full disclosure, that's the PG version of the story. The real version is there's a small orifice, a little bit lower than about here, and he was asking me if my belly button. So anyways, I remember thinking, even at 3 or 4, how hungry does someone have to be for their belly button to be touching? But also, man, I'm glad I have no idea what it's like to be that hungry. Fast forward 30 years later, this time last month, I think you all remember something that went down. And I was sitting at home, staring out the window, like many of you, thinking, I should be at the office. And like many of you, I was wrestling with the thoughts of the defeat from having to furlough my staff. I was thinking about struggling to provide basic necessities for my household, like toilet paper. And even with all my optimism, like many of you, I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Suddenly, as I'm looking out the window, sitting at home in a daze, a squirrel starts to skip across my lawn. And I thought to myself, my stomach's not touching my backbone, my mouth's not watering, I don't want to eat it. Whatever I've got going on right now, it can't be that bad. So the next time you're down and out, can't see the other end of the tunnel, it seems like nothing, it can't get worse than this. I want you to think about your superhero cartoon squirrel, or stand outside and let one skip across your yard and ask yourself, are you ready to fire up the grill? Is your mouth watering? Does it sound delicious? Or is your belly button? Well, you know. Thank you, guys.